The rain had been falling all afternoon, casting a soft gray haze over the small town. The streets were slick, reflecting the glow of neon signs from shops and cafes that fought for attention in the dreary weather. Keanu Reeves, dressed in a simple black hoodie and jeans, pushed open the door to Maggie's diner. A small brass bell above the frame jingled as he stepped inside. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm apple pie drifted toward him. Mingling with the faint hiss of the grill from the open kitchen, the diner was mostly quiet, except for a corner booth, where four people were talking loudly, their laughter sharp enough to cut through the cozy atmosphere. Keanu scanned the room, his eyes landing on a young waitress rushing between tables. Balancing a tray far too heavy for her slight frame, she looked no older than her early 20s. Her blonde hair tied back in a messy bun, strands escaping, and framing her tired face. Her apron was smudged with coffee stains, her sneakers worn thin. Yet, despite the fatigue etched into her posture, she smiled at every customer. She served every customer except the ones in the corner booth. Keanu chose a seat by the window, where he could watch both the rain and the flow of the diner without drawing too much attention. He ordered a coffee and a slice of pie from the young waitress. Her name tag read Lily, and noticed the subtle way she avoided looking toward that corner booth. She kept her shoulders tight when passing them, her pace quickening as if proximity to them stole the air from her lungs. At first, Keanu assumed it was just the normal pressure of a busy shift. But then he heard it, a mocking voice, loud enough to be intentional. "Hey, sweetheart," one of the men in the booth called out. "How about you bring us drinks before you spill them this time?" The others erupted in laughter. Lily didn't respond. She simply nodded, muttering a quiet sure before hurrying toward the kitchen. Keanu watched her go, his fingers tightening around the warm ceramic mug in front of him. Something about the way she moved, the stiffness in her shoulders, the tightness in her jaw stirred something deep inside him. Over the next 15 minutes, Keanu observed a pattern. Every time Lily approached their table, the group found some new way to belittle her. If she moved too quickly, they accused her of rushing. If she took too long, they accused her of slacking. At one point, she delivered a plate of fries, only for one of the women to dramatically pretend to inspect it like a health inspector, wrinkling her nose and saying, "Is this even edible?" The laughter that followed wasn't the kind shared between friends. It was sharp, pointed, designed to humiliate. Keanu recognized it immediately. He'd seen that kind of cruelty before, both on and off the screen, and it always had the same effect. It drained the light from people, one mocking comment at a time. He found himself leaning back in his booth, his expression unreadable to anyone watching. But his mind was already moving, already cataloging every sneer, every insult. Every moment Lily swallowed her pride just to keep her job. The moment that shifted everything came when Lily returned with a coffee pot to refill their cups. As she leaned in, one of the men accidentally bumped her arm, spilling coffee onto the table. The man jerked back in exaggerated disgust. "Oh, unbelievable. Do you even know how to do your job?" He sneered. "Maybe you should be cleaning toilets instead. Less room for mistakes." The table roared with laughter, but the sound felt uglier now, the kind that made even nearby customers glance over in discomfort. Lily's cheeks flushed crimson, and for a split second, her hands trembled as she gripped the coffee pot. She opened her mouth as if to respond, but stopped herself, biting down hard on her lip. Keanu's jaw tightened. His coffee sat untouched now. He wasn't just watching anymore, he was measuring his next move. He thought about walking over right then, shutting them down in front of everyone. But a part of him, the part that had learned patience from years of reading people, knew there was more to this than a few cruel customers. People who acted like this often believed they were untouchable. And sometimes the most satisfying justice came from letting them believe that until the moment it all flipped out when Lily retreated to the counter. Keanu caught her eye for the briefest moment. He didn't smile. Smiles sometimes felt like pity in moments like this, but he gave her a slow, deliberate nod, the kind that said, I see what's happening, and I'm not ignoring it. She blinked, almost startled, before forcing a polite grin and moving on. Keanu took another sip of his coffee, though he barely tasted it. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, the kind that clung to glass in tiny beads. Inside, the diner's atmosphere felt split, half warm and homey, half tense and brittle. Keanu's gaze drifted back to the corner booth. They were laughing again, but he noticed the way they glanced around the room now, checking if others were watching. They still thought they were in control. That was fine. They had no idea the balance was about to shift. Not yet. Keanu stayed seated, his posture relaxed, but his senses alert. Like an actor lingering backstage, waiting for the exact cue to step into the spotlight. The group in the corner had moved on from mocking Lily to loudly sharing crude jokes with each other, their laughter spilling over the hum of the diner. Every so often, one of them would glance at Lily as she worked, as though waiting for the next opportunity to pull her into their game of public humiliation. Keanu stirred his coffee slowly, letting the spoon clink softly against the mug. His eyes never straying too far from Lily's movements. She was cleaning a booth by the far wall, her hands moving in a mechanical rhythm. But her shoulders were still tense, her smile long gone. Every now and then, she would glance toward the kitchen, as if hoping her manager might step in. But the man behind the counter was too busy tallying receipts, oblivious or worse, deliberately ignoring the situation. Keanu knew that kind of inaction well. It was the silent permission that allowed cruelty to keep breathing. When Lily returned to the corner booth with their latest order, 3 burgers and a plate of onion rings, Keanu noticed her take a steadying breath before approaching. She set the plates down with practiced precision, offering a polite "here you go" that was met with a drawn-out sigh from the woman sitting nearest to her. Took you long enough, the woman said, tapping her watch theatrically. What did you do? Slaughter the cow yourself. The table erupted in laughter once again. Keanu didn't move yet. Instead, he let his gaze drift toward the jukebox. In the corner, an old machine that had probably been there since the diner opened. He slid out of his booth and strolled over casually, giving the impression of a man just stretching his legs. He fed a few coins into the slot and chose a track, something soft, soulful, and steady. The music began to play, its warmth filling the space between bursts of ugly laughter, as if reclaiming the diner's atmosphere from them. When Keanu returned to his seat, he caught Lily's eye again, this time with a faint smile, not pity, but reassurance. A small gesture, but one that seemed to pause her for half a second before she returned to the counter. The group's attention had shifted temporarily. One of the men pulling out his phone to take a picture of his burger and make some sarcastic comment about small-town service. Keanu took that moment to call Lily over. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm and warm, the kind that made people instinctively lean in. "Could I get another slice of pie and, if you don't mind, a fresh pot of coffee for my table?" His tone was deliberately polite, almost overly so. The exact opposite of the tone she'd been enduring. Lily nodded, and for the first time since he'd walked in, her smile looked almost real. She hurried off to get the order, and Keanu leaned back, letting the group notice that he was treating her with a kind of respect they clearly lacked. The coffee arrived first, steaming and rich, followed by the pie. "Thank you, Lily," Keanu said deliberately, using her name in a way that was both casual and pointed. Her eyes flickered with something gratitude, maybe, but also curiosity. He let her return to her work before turning his attention to The group in the corner, one of the men caught his gaze and smirked, misinterpreting his calm demeanor as disinterest. That was fine. Let them think that. Hey, sweetheart, the same man from earlier called to Lily. How about a smile this time? Come on. It's not like the job's that bad. Lily froze for a split second, then forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Keanu set down his fork, wiped his hands with deliberate slowness, and stood up. He didn't walk toward them yet. Instead, he stepped toward the counter, where Lily was refilling salt shakers. "You doing okay?" he asked quietly, so only she could hear. She blinked at him, surprised. "Yeah, I'm fine," she lied. Keanu tilted his head slightly, reading the truth in her tone. "If you change your mind," he said, "you let me know." He returned to his booth, but his presence had already shifted the room's energy. From then on, Keanu began to insert himself into Lily's routine in small ways. If she passed his table, he'd thank her, even if she was just refilling water. If the group tried to interrupt her, he'd ask a question loud enough to draw her back toward him. These interruptions weren't enough to start a confrontation, but they broke the rhythm of the group's harassment. Keanu knew Bullies fed on uninterrupted momentum, on the satisfaction of seeing someone squirm without escape. By inserting himself into that chain, he was chipping away at their control, piece by piece. The group noticed eventually. Their glances toward him became more frequent, their laughter more forced, and while they didn't yet realize it, Keanu was already setting the stage for something much bigger. The rain outside had stopped completely now, replaced by a dim golden glow as the evening sun began to fight its way through the clouds. Inside, the balance was beginning to shift, though the group didn't know it. They thought they were still in control. Keanu let them keep thinking that because when he finally stepped in, it wouldn't just be to stop them, it would be to make sure they never forgot what came next. The diner had taken on a golden hue as the sun dipped lower, light filtering through rain-speckled windows and scattering across the tables in warm patches. But the corner booth remained a pocket of coldness, their laughter still sharp, their voices just loud enough to demand attention. Keanu had been patient, letting them talk, letting them dig their own grave one insult at a time. But patience has its limit. The breaking point came when Lily approached with that check, hoping, maybe praying they would simply pay and leave. She set the small black folder down on the table, her hand steady despite the redness in her eyes. The man who had been the loudest all evening didn't even look at the check before snorting. "Oh, we're not done yet. Sweetheart, we'll leave when we feel like it." His tone was smug, dripping with the entitlement of someone used to bending service workers under his thumb. The woman beside him added, "Maybe you should bring us something for free and all. For all the mistakes you made tonight." The table chuckled as if it were the most original idea in the world. Keanu stood up, not quickly, not aggressively, just with the calm, unhurried grace of someone who knew exactly what he was about to do. He walked toward the booth, each step measured, his hands loose at his sides. When he reached them, he didn't address the man or the woman or any of them. He looked directly at Lily. "Lily," he said, his voice soft but clear enough for the whole diner to hear, "could you bring me another coffee? I think I might be here a while." Her brow furrowed slightly, confused, but she nodded and moved toward the counter. Only then did Keanu turn to face the booth. "You know," he began, his tone still even, "I've been sitting over there for almost an hour now, and I couldn't help but notice you've spent more time insulting this young woman than enjoying your meal." The man smirked. "What? You her boyfriend or something?" Laughter rippled again, but weaker now. Keanu didn't flinch. "No," he said simply. "I'm just someone who doesn't enjoy watching people make themselves smaller, so others can feel bigger." The man leaned back in his seat, feigning amusement. "Listen, buddy, it's none of your business. We're just having a little fun. Keanu's gaze didn't waver. Fun, he repeated, as if tasting the word and finding it sour. See, here's the thing. I've met people like you before, and you always call it fun until someone calls you on it. Then it's just a joke. Or you were just kidding. But what you're doing is not a joke. It's not harmless. It's cruelty disguised as humor. And it's as cheap as it gets. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the diner, drawing the attention of nearby tables. A couple in the corner had stopped eating. Even the man behind the counter had put down his receipts. Lily stood near the coffee machine, watching with wide eyes, her hand frozen mid-reach for the pot. The man at the booth's edge shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his friends as if expecting them to jump in. The woman rolled her eyes. Oh, please, we're just customers. She's a waitress. It's her job to take a little heat. Maybe she should toughen up. Keanu's eyes moved to her, calm but cutting. It's her job to take orders, not abuse. And as for toughening up, she's already tougher than you. You need a table full of people to back you up. She's been facing you alone all night. The words hung in the air, sharp but steady, and for a moment, the only sound in the diner was the hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. Keanu didn't press further. He let the silence stretch, let the discomfort sink in. Because he knew silence could be louder than shouting, finally, he gave them a small, almost polite nod. Enjoy the rest of your evening, he said, his voice carrying a weight that suggested it might not be much of an evening after all. He turned and walked back to his booth, sitting down just as Lily approached with his coffee. She set it in front of him without a word, but her eyes brighter now, more alive said enough. Keanu wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into his palms. He didn't look back at the booth, didn't need to. He knew the dynamics had shifted. They were quieter now, speaking in lower voices, sneaking occasional glances in his direction, and though they still thought they could salvage their dominance, Keanu had planted something in their minds, a seed of doubt, a crack in their armor. He knew it wouldn't take much more to make the whole thing crumble. The stage was set. The next move, when it came, would make sure they remembered this night for a very long time. The air inside Maggie's diner felt different now. The laughter from the corner booth had dulled into hushed murmurs, the kind of low chatter people used when they didn't want their words to carry. Lily moved through the room with a subtle change in her posture, still cautious, but no longer shrinking, away from their eyes. She avoided the booth entirely, sticking to other tables, and each time she passed Keanu's seat, there was a faint but undeniable acknowledgement in her gaze. Keanu sipped his coffee slowly, his expression calm, almost meditative, but inside, he was replaying the last hour, cataloging every insult, every condescending smirk, every deliberate attempt to humiliate her. He wasn't just reacting anymore, he was preparing. The turning point came when one of the men from the booth, the one who'd been quieter until now, got up to pay. He approached the counter where Lily stood, clearly hoping to settle the bill, without another scene, but Keanu's eyes tracked him, his calm interest making the man falter for a second. You work here long? The man asked Lily in a tone that tried to pass as casual, but came out condescending. Lily nodded faintly. A few months. The man smirked. Figures. Probably the best job you could get around here. Huh? His friends chuckled from across the room, obviously listening in, Lily's lips pressed together. Keanu set his coffee cup down and stood, walking over with an unhurried pace that somehow commanded more attention than if he'd stormed across the room. Actually, Keanu said, his voice smooth, but carrying enough weight to still the air. She could be doing a lot more than this. In fact, she has a future ahead of her that's bigger than you can imagine. The man turned, startled by how close Keanu was. Who asked you? He muttered, his false bravado faltering. Keanu's eyes didn't leave his. Nobody. That's the point. Sometimes people need to hear the truth whether they ask for it or not. He looked at Lily. His tone softening just slightly. Your father was a good man. Lily froze, her eyes widening. You knew my dad? She asked, her voice trembling. Keanu nodded. He was my stunt double on one of my earliest films. Brave, loyal, the kind of man you could trust with your life. We talked a lot between takes. He told me about you, about how smart you were, how much he believed you'd make something incredible of yourself. The diner had gone completely silent now. The group in the booth stopped pretending to chat. The other customers leaned in, sensing something important was unfolding. Keanu's voice remained steady. He once told me that no matter what happened to him, he wanted you to know you should never let anyone make you feel small. Never. Lily swallowed hard, her hand gripping the counter for balance. He passed away when I was 16, she said quietly. I've been working since then, just trying to keep going. Keanu gave a single, firm nod. And you've done more than just keep going. You've survived. You've pushed forward. That's more strength than most people in this room will ever know. His eyes flicked to the booth deliberately. The man at the counter shifted uncomfortably. Look, we didn't know, he began, but Keanu cut him off with a slight lift of his hand. You didn't have to know, he said sharply. Basic human decency doesn't require someone's life story. You treat people with respect because it's the right thing to do, not because they've earned it in your eyes. The words landed heavy, not just on the man, but on everyone within earshot. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every syllable was measured, deliberate, and all the more powerful because of it. He stepped back slightly, letting the man finish paying, but the atmosphere had shifted permanently. The bullies weren't just embarrassed now, they were exposed. When Lily handed Keanu his receipt, her hands trembled, but not from fear this time. Thank you, she said softly, her voice almost breaking. Keanu gave her a small, reassuring smile. Don't thank me yet, he replied. I'm not done. He returned to his booth, leaving the man at the counter standing awkwardly. Avoiding eye contact with anyone, across the room, his friends were watching nervously. Realizing that their ringleader wasn't in control anymore, they didn't know what Keanu was planning next, but they could feel it coming. The room was holding its breath, and Keanu was in no rush to let it exhale. The rain outside had stopped completely now, leaving the streets slick and shimmering under the glow of street lamps. Inside Maggie's diner, the air was thick with an unspoken anticipation. The group in the corner booth had grown visibly restless, shifting in their seats, whispering among themselves. The ringleader drummed his fingers against the table, avoiding Keanu's gaze, but unable to ignore the fact that the entire diner was now watching them. Keanu sat back in his booth, his hands folded loosely in front of him, the picture of composure. He didn't need to rush. He had already taken control of the room. Every word, every gesture from this point forward would land like a hammer. Lily moved cautiously between tables, stealing the occasional glance at Keanu. The faintest trace of hope had returned to her eyes, but she was still wary years of swallowing her pride had taught her not to expect a rescue. Keanu waited until she passed near his table again, then spoke just loudly enough for his voice to carry. Lily, he said warmly. Do you still have that picture? She paused, confused. What picture? He smiled faintly. The one your dad carried in his wallet. The two of you at the county fair. Lily's mouth opened slightly in surprise. I think I still have it at home, she said softly. Keanu nodded, his tone still gentle. He showed it to everyone on set. Said it was his favorite photo in the world. A murmur rippled through the diner. The group in the booth exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the crowd slipping further away. From their side, Keanu let the silence linger for a moment before standing. He didn't approach the booth immediately. Instead, he turned toward the other customers, speaking as if sharing an intimate story. Lily's father was the kind of man who would take the hardest hits and still get up smiling. He doubled for me in some of the most dangerous stunts I've ever done. I trusted him with my life, and he never once let me down. His voice was calm, but the weight behind it was undeniable. When he passed, he left behind more than memories. He left behind a daughter with the same strength he carried into every day. Then Keanu finally turned to the booth, his gaze steady, his presence towering without a hint of aggression. And tonight, you thought it was your place to tear her down, to humiliate her, to make her feel small. He took a step closer, his tone sharpening not loud, but cutting enough that each word hit like a blade. Do you know what it takes for someone to come to work day after day, knowing they might have to deal with people like you? Do you know the kind of strength that requires? The ringleader opened his mouth to reply, but Keanu held up a hand, silencing him. No, you don't, because real strength isn't about who you can push around. It's about who you can lift up. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the neon sign outside. Keanu glanced toward the other customers, then back at the booth. You walked in here thinking she was powerless because she was serving you food. But she had more power than you ever will because she still showed kindness in the face of your cruelty. That's something you'll never understand unless you change who you are. His words weren't just for them, they were for everyone listening. A reminder that dignity wasn't a privilege, but a right. The group in the booth sat frozen, their earlier bravado crumbling. The woman shifted uncomfortably, the man beside her staring at the table as though wishing it would swallow him whole. Keanu didn't gloat, didn't raise his voice in triumph. He simply let the weight of his words settle, then gave Lily a small nod. You don't owe them anything, he said gently. She blinked, the corners of her mouth trembling not from fear this time, but from the relief of hearing someone say what she'd been too afraid to believe. Keanu returned to his booth, leaving the group to stew in their shame. No one in the diner spoke for a long moment, until finally, one of the other customers began clapping quietly. It spread slowly, hesitantly at first, then louder, until the entire diner was applauding not for Keanu, but for Lily, and in that moment, the balance of the night shifted completely. The applause faded slowly, replaced by a warm hum of murmurs and approving glances toward Lily. Her cheeks flushed, but this time it wasn't from humiliation, it was from a deep, almost dizzying sense of being seen, of being valued. The group in the booth sat stiffly, their heads lowered. They weren't laughing anymore. They weren't even looking up. Keanu didn't bother sparing them another glance. The night had already done its work on them. Anything more would be indulgence. And he wasn't here for revenge alone. His purpose was bigger. Keanu motioned Lily over to his booth, and she approached hesitantly. Still unsure how to navigate the sudden change in the night's energy, she stood beside his table, her hands twisting nervously in her apron. Keanu's expression softened. You ever think about going back to school? He asked, his tone gentle but direct. Lily blinked, caught off guard. I wanted to, she admitted quietly, but after Dad passed, I had to work. I've just been trying to keep up with bills, rent, life. Keanu nodded slowly, as if he had expected that answer. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope, sliding it across the table toward her. She glanced at it, but didn't touch it. What's this? She asked, her voice cautious. Keanu smiled faintly. A promise I made a long time ago, he said. Your dad told me that if anything ever happened to him, he wanted you to have a chance to chase your dreams. That envelope has enough to cover your tuition for the first year of any program you want and some extra, so you can take a break from here if you need to. Lily stared at him, stunned. I can't take this. She stammered. You've already done so much. Keanu shook his head. You can, and you will. This isn't charity. It's respect for you, for your father, and for the person you're becoming. The diner's chatter had gone quiet again. But this time it wasn't tense, it was reverent. People weren't just witnessing an act of kindness. They were watching a promise being kept. The kind of moment that stitched itself into the memory of a place. Lily's eyes filled with tears, her fingers trembling as she took the envelope. Thank you, she whispered, the words too small for what she felt. Keanu gave a small, almost shy smile. Don't thank me. Thank the man who believed in you before you believed in yourself. His gaze lingered for a moment, and Lily could almost feel her father's presence in that silence. Keanu stood, dropping some cash on the table for his meal, more than enough to cover it twice over. He picked up his coat and headed for the door, the eyes of the entire diner following him. As he passed the booth of Bullies, he paused briefly. Without looking directly at them, he said, "It costs nothing to be kind. But nights like these can cost you your reputation. Choose better next time." Then he walked out into the damp night air, his footsteps steady, his figure disappearing into the streetlight's glow. Inside, Lily clutched the envelope, feeling, for the first time in years, that her life could be something more than survival. And in the corner booth, the once loud voices stayed silent, each of them forced to reckon with the fact that the story of this night the night Keanu Reeves turned. The tables would follow them for a very long time.